Okay. Welcome, everyone. It is really great to have you here this afternoon. My name is Yetunde Daniels Rubinstein, and I am the Director of Post-Secondary Partnerships here at Private School Village. And I am really excited to be in partnership with two incredible colleagues who will share with you from the college counseling side of things, the world, how to prepare for the world of the admission journey, and sharing some tips with you. So, to kick us off, a few housekeeping notes. Because we are in a webinar format, you can answer any and add any and all of your questions in the Q&A box, and we will try our best to get to them today. If not, look for a follow-up email with some follow-up questions, or if we actually go back to some of our previous videos and recordings, some of your questions may have been answered there. In the interim, however, I will kick us off and get started by introducing some of our panelists, actually having them introduce themselves to you. You know me, you know my bio. Hello again. And Burnie, if you can just introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Burnie Dyment. And first, I want to say thank you, Yetunde, for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be a part of this presentation. My career in education started for a college preparatory program through the University of Southern California. I started as an English teacher and then moved into college counseling. After that, I worked for a couple of independent college counseling companies before then becoming a director of college counseling at an independent school in Southern California. And now I am an independent college counselor, so back in the independent world again.
Great. So wonderful to have you here. And Julian, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me, Yetunde. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, I guess my path is relatively similar, actually. I started in admissions at Amherst, which is where I went, and I worked in the admissions office there because I wasn't ready to leave college. So it seemed like a great job to have. And that just kind of opened up a lot of other opportunities within the education sphere. So I worked at a private school outside of Washington, D.C., and then I worked for an independent college counseling company. My office was based in New York. And then I took a job at a very progressive high school on the west side of Los Angeles, which brought me back to my hometown, and I worked there for about a decade. And now I'm back on the independent side as well. So I've seen the process from all angles. I've worked with students from all backgrounds at this point, from I'm losing track of how many different countries in the world. So I really enjoy helping people figure out their story. I enjoy learning about other people's lives and backgrounds, and helping students and families navigate this process as anxiety-free as possible, not without anxiety, but as free from as much of it as possible. And hopefully thinking about it less as a means to an end, right? Like, where am I going to go to school, but more about what am I going to learn about myself in the process, and how that might be a launching pad to great things in the future. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both Burnie and Julian. Thank you again for joining us. I was thinking about our bio and our years of experience. We have been collectively, we're very old. We are in our 60s professionally, and have worked with thousands of students over the years. So collectively, we're bringing lots of wisdom and wonderful gems to our private school village community. So I'm really excited to kick us off with some more information. So Burnie, if you can start out by telling us, setting the tone for us in terms of what is this process about? What is the end goal? Julian kind of kicked it off a little bit more. If you can delve in a bit more about the college admission process, how do you see it?
Yeah, well, I think one thing and I've always said as a college counselor, it's more than just about helping you get into college. It's about helping you successfully complete college. and finding a college where you feel you're going to really thrive at that college. And it's also, as Julian said, help self-discovery and helping the student and in the process develop life skills and skills that will serve them well throughout their lives. I think that college admission it can induce a lot of anxiety for sure. And I think that parents often want kind of the magic formula. Tell me, the question I get a lot, tell me exactly what I need to do. Tell me the magic. It's almost like a magic formula, right? To get into this elite school. And the thing is, there's no magic formula. I mean, if there is a formula, it is for the student to figure out who they are, what are their passions, what are their interests, and are you developing those passions? Are you also, so we know grades and the type of courses you're taking, in some instances, test scores, extracurriculars, those are all important factors. But the other word that I think we all agree on is fit. Are you finding the right fit for you? And are you able to articulate that in your application? And so, if we look at, we have some younger, those starting off in high school right now. And so how should that look when I'm starting off in high school? How do I begin this process of self-discovery? And I think one of the first things is finding out, what do I value? Identifying what is your value system. And that will play into college in terms of, is it important that you go to an elite school? Is that important? Or are you open to considering a wide variety of schools? It really boils down to your value system. So doing some work to get in tune with, what are my values? Now, at most schools, a great place to start at most schools, students either use Naviance or SCORE or Maya Learning or CALFO. It's the college and career kind of research platforms. On there are those assessments, right? It's personality, career, interest assessments. That could be one place to begin to get in touch with not only your values, but what are your interests? What are your strong interests? What are majors that you could possibly start to consider, or careers that you could consider? And if your school doesn't use any of those, or maybe those assessments are turned off, there are outside assessments that students can take to get more in touch with, what are my interests? What are my passions? I think ninth grade, when you're beginning high school, it's important. High school is new. You want to become comfortable with the rhythm and schedule and demands of high school in that first year. But I think you also definitely, so when we talk about extracurriculars, you want to get involved. You want to think, how can I broaden my experience? And so first and foremost, you want to make sure that I'm involved at my school. Am I engaged in some way with my school community? That's kind of first and foremost. That's a given. And then outside of that, if you're thinking, okay, how can I broaden my experience? Then what can I do locally? What can I do regionally? What can I do statewide? What can I do nationally? And sometimes internationally. And I know that may seem like internationally. Yeah, internationally. What if you got involved with a nonprofit that had an international component? You were volunteering. I mean, there are ways. And I think, again, it goes back to, it's tailored to each student. So every student is different. And you have to decide, for me, what are my strengths? What are my limitations? Having all honors classes or all AP classes, that may not be for every student. You have to figure out what is going to be the right fit for me. What is going to be the right amount of balance for me? But yes, as a freshman, deciding your courses and stretching yourself to take honors courses, not being afraid to take honors courses, because keeping the long view in mind is that, okay, if I want to be able to take certain AP or advanced courses as a junior or senior, I need certain courses during my freshman and sophomore years. So not being afraid to take those courses, and even not being afraid to take AP courses, when the time comes, when the time is appropriate, because it's the only way that you can learn to manage, right? What that means to have this increased load. You learn, you adjust to that, and then the next year you add more. So it's just a stepping stone. The other piece that I want to stress too is when you're starting off in high school, I think developing your support network, deciding who's going to be on my team, right? Who is going to be on my team? So whether it's certain teachers that you develop a rapport with, administrators, maybe members of your team, mentors and so forth are not at your school. Maybe you find them in the community. Maybe you find them through family, friends. But I think it's so critical for students to develop a support network and early on. So people that you can go to, and as you're trying to identify, well, what careers am I interested in? What careers are the right fit for me? These are individuals, trusted adults that you can go to and have those conversations. And they can tell you what they see in you, right? When you have those critical decisions to make of, oh, should I take 3 or 4 AP classes, or is that too much? Or am I ready for AP physics? You can go and have these important conversations and gather information to make these critical decisions. So I just encourage students to create that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think, I mean, gosh, you've hit on so many gems that we will circle back throughout this conversation. But the idea of, and I know sometimes folks will get a little frustrated that there isn't one path that exists that is the perfect match for everyone else. However, there are some key markers, as you just mentioned, there are key markers and key steps that you should be taking along the way. So, and what I heard you say a lot of is each year builds on the next, and each year prepares you better to be better the next year. So you should be taking full advantage of that. And the goal at the end of all this isn't to get into college. It is to graduate and excel and move beyond those 4 years. So Julian, can you tell for the 7th and 8th graders in the room and their families and support systems, what on earth should they be doing? What are their building blocks that we want them to be thinking about right now in May of their 7th and 8th grade years? Hang on, Julian, you're muted.
I did it again. I was like, I'm not going to do it. We practiced this. For 7th and 8th graders and their families, I think we should be thinking less about specific colleges as end goals and more about, like you said, the sort of the kind of person that you want to be, sort of prognosticating forward. Who do you want to be when you've graduated? If we're talking about that academically, thinking about the types of classes you want to be able to take, there are likely choices that you can make in 7th and 8th grade that will help set you up in the future, specifically in math and in foreign language most often. So finding opportunities to get ahead, maybe that means summer school, maybe that means taking something online, maybe that means doubling up somewhere, and it sort of depends on what your options are at your respective school. But thinking about what choices you want to have down the line is a good time to start doing that. On a more basic level, you're really building skills, right? Like you're learning how to study, you're learning how to manage your time, you're learning how to balance extracurricular activities, friends, whatever 7th graders have. Other than that, I don't know. I'm old at this point. And still trying to be the best student that you can be. And those things shouldn't be taken lightly. So I would just encourage them to use this time to build their skill set, build a habit of reading, whether that's books or news articles from vetted sources, or just like interesting pieces of writing, because that will help with vocabulary, which will help with English, which will help with the SATs, all these sort of benefits, not least of which is making you an interesting person, having something to say. But building these skills and practicing them before the stakes are high. Because once you enter high school, then the grades that you get count to a different degree, right? And certainly once you get to 10th grade, if we're talking about the UCs, then everything is sort of, it matters. It's very real. So there's not the same pressure to be perfect, and there really shouldn't be any pressure to be perfect other than to just be the best that you can be. But your grades matter a little bit less than your skills that you gather, and your ability to push yourself and to try things, and to start getting a sense of what it is that you like, begin to formulate those opinions so that you can hit the ground running, and don't use ninth grade as a sort of like tepid trial year, but you enter high school on fire because you already begun answering these questions.
I love that. So you've both set a wonderful, I hope everybody's hearing, this is the framework that we're going to be building upon. 7th and 8th grade, we're thinking about value setting, we're thinking about skill building, we're thinking about what do I love and why, we're thinking about who do I want to be, and this is we're asking every student to do that self-evaluation along the way. And I also heard you say, but you didn't say, we're thinking about as a skill building set, self-advocacy. Have you learning how to talk to teachers, learning how to ask for what you need, and each year getting much better at that. Because remember, as Burnie said in the beginning, when you get to that fit factor later on, you shouldn't be thinking about, okay, this is who I am as an 11th grader. This is a process that should have been developed along the way. So 7th and 8th grade skill building, time management, social management, self-advocacy, the building the habit of reading. Can we start that and say it louder with some echoes for the folks in the back? The habit of reading. Read whatever you want, just read a lot of it. And really thinking about who am I, what do I love, and why, and continuing to evaluate and interrogate that over time. Because one of the things that we often ask that I would like really encourage parents and students to do, and something you talked about, Julian, I'd love for you to go back to, is the scope and sequence of what is going to be available to you, the scope and sequence of classes. So to graduate high school in California, there are a set of classes that you must take. You don't have a choice, you must take them. Within your school, there are a different set of graduation requirements that you must hit. You don't have a choice, you must take them. Around that, you may have some flexibility and choice. And something Julian alluded to earlier was, if I take a summer course or I take an online course, how does that get me out from some of the requirements or push me a little bit further within the requirements scope and the sequence, and opportunities to talk about mastery down the line? And Burnie, I want to come back to you about mastery in a little bit. So make a note, we'll talk about that. So Julian, can you talk to us about scope and academic?
Sure. And to be honest, I would actually never say to get out of requirements. I mean, I think that's a possibility, but I think if you have the time, then you should take advantage of the time that you have. So really, it's about maximizing how far you can get with any of these subjects, right? So if you start algebra before high school, it's a lot easier to get to calculus than if you start algebra 1 as a 9th grader. So thinking about, okay, so now you say you want to do business or go to medical school or be an engineer or anything that has anything to do with numbers. Calculus is going to be one of those classes that the most competitive students are going to have on their resume. And not even just calculus A, but calculus PC. So there are levels to this, and this is why a part of the question is like, what do you actually like? You know, it's not necessary that you max out in every subject, right? I think as Burnie said, the goal is to take the most rigorous course load that makes sense for you, and that's different for every student. But what is certainly true is that in the subjects that you say you like, in the things that you are considering you want to potentially major in, these are the areas that should be expressed through your transcript as demonstrating your highest intellectual curiosity, right? So if it involves STEM, how can I get ahead in the sciences? What can I do? And there are definitely ways. In foreign language, certainly you can start Spanish 1 or Mandarin 1 or whatever the language is that appeals to you, and give yourself a chance to get to a higher place by the time you graduate. So thinking about what is actually interesting to you, and I think sort of to the point that you were making as well earlier, Burnie, about what that magic thing is, it really is you, the student. Like you are the magic thing. It doesn't actually matter how good of a wordsmith any of us are in helping you craft an essay if there's no substance to the essay. And the substance is built on choices that you make, not one, but over and over and over and over again, about how you're going to spend your time, what you care about, and what you're willing to do. So in thinking about when there's a line for sort of what good enough is, how many times are you going to not accept that as your personal line, right? Especially in the areas that you say you have interest in, both in and out of the classroom. And that's how you distinguish yourself as a person, because your interests will be different than your best friends, will be different than your sisters or brothers, right? And how you see the world will be different just because you're a different person. And then the action that you take on those things in the classroom and out of the classroom manifest in ways that are unique to yourself. So you are the magic sauce. It really begins with you taking ownership of your own education, not being lazy when you have that option about what you want to do, and actively engaging your curiosity in ways that manifest.
I kind of want to almost hit a mic drop on that. You are the magic sauce. And true, very true. But I love the further explanation of this. The substance of your application is built on the choices you make over time. Also very true. And the pieces around when you're like, if I have the choice to spend more time doing the thing I love, getting better at doing the thing I love, will I choose to opt to not get better at that, or will I choose to go further? Thank you so much for that. Go ahead, Burnie.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Julian, at the end, you used the word curiosity. And I think
Yeah.
thinking of it is nurturing your intellectual curiosity.
Mhm.
So you want to try taking courses. If a student wants to take courses through dual enrollment at a 2-year college, think of it more as what am I curious about? What subjects? And those should be courses that are not offered at your high school, right? These are subjects not offered that you're curious about. And so it becomes an extracurricular. It really does. It's an extracurricular activity. I'm taking this course at this 2-year college. Now, sometimes we can't fit everything in our schedule. And there are certain courses that we need to maybe take, we take during the summer online. But I really encourage students to nurture your intellectual curiosity. And that goes to,
Yes.
that's in line with figuring out what are my interests? What am I considering majoring in? Maybe you take a course at a 2-year college and you realize, I don't think that subject's for me, or that path is for me. Let me try something else. But you're nurturing your intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So again, everybody understands we've got the framework. You are the gift, you are the magic, you are the secret sauce, but there are specific ways we want you to continue to build, nurturing your curiosity, continuing to skill build in 7th and 8th grade so that you're starting 9th grade, leaning into the best parts of yourself, maybe the parts that you've discovered you're not so great at, but you're going to use 9th grade to be better at. And then we begin to really think about more concretely about the admission process. There are 7 factors, and I will put this in the chat, but also remind you later on, 7 important factors we want you to think about in terms of the big picture. Your academic record, that is your high school transcript, that is any additional courses or something else you may have taken outside of that, outside of your 4 years, 9th through 12th grade. Academic record, really, that is the most important part of the application. It doesn't matter what else you might have done. This is an academic pursuit, so you have to make sure you remember to focus on your academic record. You want to think about that academic record, as we have alluded to, in terms of rigor, and GPA, sure, but really think about what is that high school record saying about me. We talked a little bit about activities. Now, as Burnie just said, activities just doesn't mean what are the clubs and activities I've been involved in within my school frame. How am I involved in my community? How am I involved in my regional, as Burnie said before, sure, you start within your community, but think even broader. So activities can look very different, but how is it also a reflection of who I am as a person, my loves, my strengths, my interests, how I have test driven a couple different things that I found out that I didn't like over time. That too is okay, but activities is another. We want you to think about your recommendation letters. So as a part of that, of your 4 years, you are in partnership with instructors who are getting to see who you are as a person and as an intellectual. And they are going to have a conversation with their college-based colleagues saying, this is who we have seen this person to be. And this is why we think they're going to be fantastic in your class. Here is why they are supremely prepared to be in your class. So thinking back to, again, our framing conversation at the beginning, who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I want to demonstrate that over time? That will go into a recommendation letter from an instructor in your 11th grade. So keep that in the back of your mind. So if you're like, I'm shyer, I don't really like to interact with my teachers. Remember, we talked about self-advocacy also. How are you calling in your support people around you to say and encourage who you are? It becomes a part of the application later. There's a method to all of the madness. And of course, the actual application. So as again, Julian just dropped it for us. The substance of the application are the choices, the collection of the choices you have made over time. So don't lose sight of that. And the final thing we want to highlight as a major factor, obviously, is costs. And that means something very different to each student and their families. So we want to keep that in back of mind as we delve into a few of the questions that you so generously offered when you registered. Before I jump into the questions, Julian or Burnie, any follow-ups to those factors you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the recommendation letters. So I think, yes, self-advocacy and going to those teacher office hours or the times that teachers have available to meet with you, getting very comfortable with doing that. But I think the other thing is giving your teachers information when it comes time to, if they've agreed to write that letter of recommendation. Now, your college counseling office may have something in place already of things that you fill out to give to the teacher. If they do not, then you want to make sure that you give something to the teacher offering more information about you. So whether it's a resume, whether it's a brag sheet, whether you kind of write out, this is what I enjoyed about your class, this is what I enjoyed about this particular project, this is what I got out of this particular project, this is how I feel that I've grown in your class. Because often you have the same teachers writing a lot of the recommendation letters, right? Because you will try to find a junior teacher to write that letter of recommendation. and that teacher has many recommendation letters to write. And while they know you, they have many letters to write. So you want to be helpful. You want to thoughtfully fill out any forms that your school gives you, or just be mindful to give something to the teacher and say, I'm just submitting this to be helpful to you as you write my letter of recommendation.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll echo that. That's actually something that we work with our clients on, is creating a thank you note for your teachers. Just like you said, you can imagine every recommendation letter is positive. So positive is not actually helpful, right? It's got to be specific. There's got to be something there that's going to give someone a reason to fight for you, some evidence that they can use on your behalf. So that's great advice. But I wanted to go back to extracurricular activities a little bit, because I know that one of the prevailing questions is just like, how do I differentiate myself? How do I make myself stand out? And one of the first ways is by not doing the things that everyone is doing, right? Like if your school has a Model UN club, that's great. And no disrespect to Model UN at all, but like every high school has one. And so there are very few ways to do Model UN in a way that actually stands out, because we see them all the time. So if you have an interest in political science, maybe you do Model UN, but maybe you also think about, how can I extend my interest in political science or diplomacy in some more personal way? Maybe that's through a curated reading list. Maybe that's through creating your own club, your own diplomacy club. Maybe that's through partnering with a nonprofit that works with refugees or something like that. There are myriad ways that you can build upon your interests that go beyond the standard offerings of high school. Same thing with acting in the school play. That's great. But even if you're the lead every year, every high school has a lead every year. So on some level, it's not going to be the most special thing you can do. But how can you use your interest in acting to impact a community around you? Is there a middle school or something that doesn't have an arts program that you can be an after-school director for? Maybe you take your talents online and create your own video series that speaks to an issue that's relevant to you and your community. Maybe you use your acting talents and your interest in math to create a cool tutorial series for, I don't know, I'm just making this up as I go, but for whatever your interests are, there are ways that you can take them and make them very, very personal. Maybe that's doing a research project if you're sort of STEM inclined. Maybe that's starting your own business, if that's your thing. Learning coding and diving deep into these. There's a lot of things that you can do to make your interest personal. So if your extracurriculars are confined to what your high school has offered, then you're missing opportunities to really set yourself apart and to push yourself in the kind of way that the most selective schools are expecting of their applicants to do. So it's really in your court how you want to spend your time. You can't do everything, but for the things that, again, that you say that you love, you can really dive in and find ways to challenge yourself and have fun with it. Like, they shouldn't feel like chores. None of these suggestions should feel like you're being forced to do it. They should feel like opportunities to grow, to learn, and engage. And if that's true, and if that resonates, then that will reach the admissions officers in a very different way than just sort of doing the things that are prescribed.
Yeah, and I think also in terms of looking at careers or possible majors that may be the right fit for you. Part of, as you investigate, informational interviews, where I'm going to interview someone. I think I'm interested in medicine. Let me interview this doctor to find out what it really entails. Or I think I'm interested in engineering, or whatever it may be. But particularly for young people, most professionals would be happy to give some of their time for you to ask questions. And you never know, you may in the process get an advocate for you. Hey, I met with this great kid today. Do you want to volunteer in our office? Or, if you're looking for a mentor for a particular research project, maybe that's how you discover that mentor for the research project. But I think as you think about careers, really figure out what does the day-to-day look like for that career, right? What was someone else's path and getting there? And you can get that through an informational interview. Just, can I have a small amount of your time to ask you a couple of questions? So I encourage students to do that.
Yeah, I really appreciate those responses, because you're right. Those are a lot of the questions we received was around how do we actually, there's one specific question that really encompasses much of what you already said. How are we crafting impactful experiences? I love the use of the word impactful. And it's super important to think about, of everything you do, what is my why? What is the impact I'm seeking to make? And if I don't make that impact, that's okay. But I'm attempting to make an impact in some way, shape, or form as a signal to, this is who I will be. This is who I can be. Here are some possibilities of what I can bring to your community later. So the question is spot on in terms of impact. And I hope you're heeding what Julian has offered, in that if I am thinking creatively and thinking more broadly about how I can, the activities I can get involved in, more opportunities I can create for myself, I'm not creating chores. I'm not creating a heavy lift. I'm not inconveniencing myself and my entire family to create something that I think will look good. The minute you think to yourself it will look good, you've gone wrong. So double back and go back and think about impact. What am I trying to learn? What am I going to gain? What am I offering by doing this thing? If I have created a fantastic vegetable patch, awesome. Why? Was it for, to further my intellectual curiosity around science? And am I doing some chemistry experiments and biology experiments? That's great. So think about your why and think about your impact as you're building your activity list. And as parents, as you're giving input, think about what time does the student have? By creating this new activity, what does it mean they have to give up? Think back to their values. What does your kid value? What are they really great at? And what are you asking them to sacrifice by potentially doing something else because you think it might look good? So double back down on those pieces. So thank you so much for jumping ahead. I really wanted to there are a number of questions in our coming in around the academic transcript. Makes sense, right? This particular question, if my kid is strong in language arts, so humanities based, has B's in math and science, but has a strong interest in becoming a physician, what's the best approach, or what is, let's just say, an approach to becoming a physician if the academic record is speaking humanities strength and not math science strength?
Well,
Burnie, can I have you jump in, and then I'll have Burnie and then Julian, you'll add. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it goes back to values, to begin with values, to ask yourself, why do I want to go into medicine? And what have I done to thoroughly investigate that profession to confirm that this is what I want to do? So beginning with asking yourself why, and then also, have you also looked at other careers that may be related to healthcare or medicine, but where you can use your academic strengths, right? Where you would make good use of your academic strengths. If after all that investigation, you still conclude, I want to pursue medicine, then I think it comes down to how you build your college list, and seriously considering perhaps small to medium-sized schools that are more undergraduate focused, where you will get the mentorship that you need as a pre-med. And really being open right? That because you're going to need a lot of support, you're going to want a lot of support because you're pursuing something that is not necessarily your strength, but it is what you want. And so you want to go to a school where you will have that strong support network. So I think it boils down to diversifying the college list as well and the types of schools that you consider.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Julian, yeah.
I don't disagree with any of that. I guess I would, my first question is sort of, we're presupposing that the student is actually not capable of math and science to the same degree as humanities. So my first question is, we need to probably get a tutor in math and science, and figure out how now, if this is something you're interested in, irrespective of whether or not you're still going to want to be a doctor down the line, if this is something that you say that you're interested in, then this is something you need to invest your time in improving. So it's great that the humanities come more naturally. And now we need to figure out what different study skills, techniques, mentors, tutors help to improve our skills in math and science. That to me is the first thing. Burnie is entirely correct. There are a lot of pathways to the same goal. And luckily, pre-med is not a major, it's a program. So you'll still have to major in something else, and that could be English, quite frankly, and meet these requisite classes to have the pre-med distinction in graduation. So there's some level of strategy. We don't need to get too much into the weeds about how you apply to kind of mask weaknesses that I think we need to think about. But like on a more basic level, let's get better at math and science. If this is where we have an interest, then we need to exhaust every way of thinking about how we're learning. Just because maybe one thing didn't work, or one tutor didn't work, or we didn't like a teacher, like I'm presupposing all kinds of things into this question. But let's actually start. Let's start there.
Yeah. Agreed with everything already shared. I'm looking at the time. We've got about 15 minutes to go. I have a few more questions. If folks in the audience would like to put additional questions in the Q&A box, feel free to do so. There was a couple questions that came in around costs. Can we talk a little bit about the realities of college costs and paying for costs? Quite a few questions came in around the middle class family, but I'll say for me that is not my primary goal, not goal necessarily, but my primary skill level in working with students. And I would often refer to a financial aid professional. But how do you, when in working with students, how do you talk to families about costs and trying to maximize scholarship opportunities?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like I work with people on sort of opposite ends of the spectrum, much less so in the middle. I think first and foremost, this needs to be a conversation that is had openly and transparently within the family about what we can afford, what we're willing to do, before students get their sights set, their hopes up on places that might not be realistic. I think the onus is on students to some extent to really think about what their options are once they have information from the people who are writing the check. Finding scholarships really is piecemeal. There's not like one way or place to do it. There are a couple of websites, I mean, scholarships.com easily enough, but it really is sort of doing a lot of investigation. Sometimes they're attached to specific universities, sometimes they're attached to specific organizations, sort of eligible based on being left-handed, being a female, being California, writing a scholarship, an essay for a particular brand. There's all kinds of reasons. So if cost is going to be a major factor in building your list or in your experience. And I think that you just have to kind of get in the weeds and do that work. But that needs to be a conversation that happens, I think, early in the process. And there are a lot of great schools, you know, at different price points. There are a lot of great schools that maybe based on your academic record are more likely to offer you scholarship money than others. You know, the Ivies don't do merit scholarships at all. That's not their thing. So that's also something to think about again as you're building your list. But I'll just end that by saying debt sucks. Like walking away with a degree in a world that's changing every month, not even every year, with, you know, a burden around your neck of 5, sometimes 6 figures is not necessarily the move to set you up in the way that you probably want to be set up. So it's very important to think about the end goal, and to really understand that the name on your diploma matters so much less than the way that you approach your time in college, the networks that you build, how you apply yourself, and kind of go from there.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think in terms of looking at cost of college, as Julian said, if you want to focus on the elite schools, then you know I'm giving up merit-based scholarships. If I want merit-based scholarships, then I can't go over to the elite schools. So you can have both on your college list, but just know where the merit-based scholarships will come from. You know, and there are ways to research who gives more merit-based scholarships. Again, if you're willing to look broadly, if you're willing to look out of state, if you're willing to look at small to medium-sized liberal arts colleges, you know, there are places where you're more likely to get merit-based scholarships and an excellent education, right? You know, an excellent education. You know, colleges that change lives, that's a consortium of colleges that are small to medium size that are typically generous with their merit-based scholarships. You know, they have great track records of students graduating in 4 years and the types of grad schools that they go off to, you know, and that's colleges that change lives. That's ctcl.org. But there are other places where you can look to find merit-based scholarships. I think the other thing is there's something called common data set. So if you Google the name of any university and put common data set, it brings up all the information related to admissions for that particular university. And there's a section in the common data sets, section H, that lists if that school, what number of students applied for financial aid, what number of students were actually given financial aid, and what number of students were actually given merit-based aid. So if you're curious about, oh, is this school generous with merit-based aid? You know, that's one place to look as you investigate. There's also, just in trying to figure out, okay, what will the total cost of attendance be for my family based on our income level? Net price calculator, right, is every college by law is required to have a net price calculator on their website that usually gives you a worst case scenario of how much you can expect to pay. Some colleges include their merit-based aid in that. But as you, and we encourage students to go and meet with college reps. As you meet with college reps, one question you want to ask is your net price calculator accurate? Is it up to date? Right? Because I'm trying to determine, you know, how much this will cost. So you want to verify that. But there are ways to do your research in advance to find out, can I expect to receive some sort of merit-based aid?
Yeah. Those are very, very helpful tips to think about. And I'll again, in your follow-up email, we'll have some additional, have this information and additional information. Before we wrap, one of the questions on everybody's mind is around standardized testing. Can we take a 30 seconds to talk about standardized testing? Can I start with you first, Burnie, and then we'll go to Julian. Then I'll add my 2 cents.
So when it comes to standardized testing, I believe families should have options. And I know it has been crazy with testing and everything, but students should take the SAT or ACT and at least have scores just to give you more options. Certainly by junior year, you want to have set for one of those exams. And in turn, and know that colleges accept either exam. They don't prefer one over the other. I like the approach of, maybe toward the end of sophomore year, taking a diagnostic to determine, is the SAT better for me or is the ACT better for me? Most test prep companies offer those diagnostics for free. Now you have to keep in mind they're offering it because they want you to sign up with their company, but you don't necessarily have to do that. But you just want to see, how do I score and what test is going to be the right fit for me? Is it going to be the ACT? Is it going to be the SAT? And then from there, you can develop a plan of action of when you will take it. If you will take it early in junior year, and so your test prep is going to start early, or if it's better for you to take it in the springtime when the information from your junior classes, particularly math, when you've improved in those areas, you've gained more information in those areas or more knowledge in those areas. But I believe, just to make sure that you have options, sit for one of the standardized tests.
Yes, agreed. Julian.
Yeah, and just kind of back to the point about scope and sequence in 7th and 8th grade, the math that you take then will help sort of determine when you're ready for SAT math. So if you start on a later path, it's very, very possible that you won't actually have learned all the content you need until you're done with junior year. That's just something to think about as one sort of tangible thing. Yeah, the SAT, standardized testing, they're back. They're back at enough places for us to just say that they're back. And I think for most people, it will factor into your process in at least a couple of the schools that you're thinking about. So if it's yes for one, then it's yes. These tests are not an indication of how smart or gifted or sort of valuable of a human you are, but they are an indicator of how well you know how to take this test, which for many of you will require learning different skills than what helps you do well in your actual classes. So test prep is a very, very important thing. I'm not going to recommend any specific test prep plan. I think you have to do what makes sense for your family, your budget. But this is not something that you can just show up and expect to do your best. So this is something that you have to build towards. It's a slow process. You learn, you improve, you learn, you improve, you recognize patterns, right? This is what a big part of test prep is, so that you can identify questions quickly and make educated guesses. And you figure out how to actually take this test. So for students who are in the beginning of their high school career, again, just encouraging specific math and problem solving skills, vocabulary acquisition, right? Reading a lot, writing new weird words down in your iCloud or Dropbox or wherever people keep notes. Building those skills, taking the PSAT seriously when it's offered, and before 10th grade is done, having had a conversation about what our test prep plan and strategy is going to be, so that you can slowly build towards performing at your highest level.
Yes. Everything that you've both offered, but if I can underscore that, yes, we do advocate for test prep, not necessarily with the one particular company or not, but the idea of getting you used to, as Julian has said, taking a test that is drastically different from what you're used to seeing and in the way you're used to seeing tests every day in the classroom. Believing that you can rock up to an official test day because you're bright and do well will not work. And it takes away the choice that Burnie alluded to. You may not have the choice of, you know, the types of schools that you want to be applying to because you did not prepare. So back up to 7th and 8th grade and think back to skill building. Start now. Start thinking about sitting a test, all of the wonderful pieces that you will need to have by 11th and 12th grade. Does start much earlier, but not in a stressful manner. Again, thinking of skill building, thinking of self-advocacy, thinking of choices, thinking of habit creation, thinking of value evaluation. And yes, you are the gift. You are the gift, and you have the substance that you will need over time to compile a beautiful application. That's all the time we have today, but I do want to share our contact information. Should you have further questions, feel free to get in touch with either of us, and know that, of course, we'll have additional program coming up through PSV. I'm trying to find my slide here that I've lost. We will have additional programming coming up through PSV that you'll be able to log in and find more information and learn, maybe even from around specific topics later on. So junior, great specific areas. Keep an eye out for more of what's coming, and we are going to be here to support you. So let's see, do you see my screen? You don't. Hang on one second, let's try again. Yes, do you see the screen now? Fabulous. So if you would like to be in touch with any of us, feel free to take a screenshot of this, and that's how you find us. And again, we will be sending out this recording for you at the end of our session today. But Burnie, Julian, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap for today?
Sure. I would just reiterate my own great advice already, that you are your own secret weapon. You are everything that you need, you have within you, including the answers to the questions about your who and your why. They come from your family, they come from the things that upset you, they come from the things that keep you awake at night, they come from the things that make you excited. So really, this is a process about listening to yourself, about reflecting, and about leaning towards action as opposed to letting time pass, waiting for someone else to give you permission. And the more willing you are to do that in your process, the earlier you start doing that, I think the more happy and effective you will be. And I think ultimately, the more happy with the choices that you'll have.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Burnie.
And I would just say, just keep in mind that really the minute you step onto your high school campus, you have started in a way writing your college application, right? By the decisions that you make, by the classes that you take, by the extracurriculars you become involved in, by the relationships that you build with teachers and administrators and so forth. So just keeping that in mind, of begin with the end in mind. And this is where I want to get to. How am I going to get there? Make sure that you identify what your support network is going to be. Make sure that you learn the art of decision making. Because now in high school is when you have to start really making wise decisions, right? That will help you achieve your goal, with the ultimate decision being where you're going to end up attending college, right? Come May 1st for National Decision Day, where will I go? And so get in touch with, what are my values? What do I deem important? What are my passions? And then lastly, just making sure through your support network that you're learning time management and organization, right? Because you'll be juggling a lot. I'll be juggling my rigorous classes, juggling extracurriculars. So it's certain skills that you want to try to learn early on and seek out support to help you learn those skills.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And my final words are for those students who are in 11th grade and you're listening to some of what we talked about already and you're like, gosh, I'm not there yet. That's okay. The fact that you're here or the fact that your family is here, this is your start point. And begin with some of what we already talked about, an evaluation of who am I, what do I want, why do I want it, and being honest with yourself right now. It is not too late. However, if you keep waiting, it will become too late. So it is not too late right now. So let's get right back on the horse, get right back to, even if you're unsure, being unsure, but articulating why you're unsure is still action and movement. So it is not too late of my 11th graders who have not done anything quite yet about the college process. And we are here to support and encourage you in any way possible. So be in touch with us. We appreciate your time. Have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. And if you have any questions, you know where to find us. Thanks, everybody.